Lula's lost a battle, but insists he'll win the war. Brazil's charismatic former president vowing to fight on after appellate judges upheld his bribery conviction. He's got other cases pending. Polls show that even with those other legal cases, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva remains the clear frontrunner in the race for president. The Workers' Party endorsing him to run in October. Will he be allowed to stand? Is he the best Brazil can come up with in these times of recession and scandal? It's not just Lula, but politicians from across the spectrum that stand accused of taking bribes as part of Operation Lavo Jato, or Operation Car Wash. At the heart of it, construction firm Odebrecht, whose kickbacks extended everywhere from Mexico to Argentina. What does the scandal say about Brazil, the continent, and its fledgling democracies? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the issue of whether it'll be prison or the presidency for Lula. And with us, Luis Felipe de Alencastro, who teaches history at the Sao Paulo School of Economics. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We welcome back attorney Fernando Santiago, based here in the French capital. Nice to see you.
My pleasure.
We're also with Indy Landaro, former Wall Street Journal correspondent in Latin America. Happy New Year.
Good evening.
And from Geneva, Jamil Chad, correspondent for daily newspaper Estado de Sao Paulo, and the author of Politics, Bribes, and Football. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Yeah, let's start with the latest. The Workers' Party confirming the nomination of its founder. Lula will be candidate in next October's presidential vote. This despite losing an appeal on his conviction. In fact, the sentence extended. But of course, there'll be more on the legal proceedings. The PT and its leader making that setback almost sound like a victory. Solange Mougin has more.
Comparing himself to a political prisoner, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva said nothing will stop his presidential hopes. Defiantly before a crowd of thousands, he said his latest conviction of corruption will not keep his name off the presidential ballot.
Nelson Mandela was in prison for 27 years. But his fight did not decrease because of that. He returned and became president of South Africa.
Lula has maintained his innocence since being convicted last year of receiving a seaside apartment as a kickback for doling out contracts to the state oil company Petrobras. But Wednesday's appeal verdict is a blow to the 72-year-old's plans to run for president again. Because under Brazil's clean slate laws, a conviction makes him ineligible to run. The three-judge panel unanimously upheld the lower court's decision and added jail time, bringing it to over 12 years. Lula has vowed to continue fighting the verdict and the 6 other corruption cases against him, much to the joy of his supporters.
We are taking to the streets because we want to defend Lula tooth and nail.
The court's decision, though, was a breath of fresh air at this anti-corruption rally.
We're thirsty for justice. We need punishment. Those who steal in this country must be punished.
A polarizing figure in Brazil, Lula has been polling well, with over 30% of Brazilians saying they'd vote for him next October. But with more appeals ahead, he may be facing an uphill battle.
Let me give you Jamil Chade. How's it looking for Lula? Because our correspondent was saying it's a big legal setback, no doubt about it, but it's actually could give him more political traction, this decision.
Well, in fact, that is true. Actually, he just said a couple of minutes ago that he has no reason to respect the decision. This is clearly pointing out that, yes, he will continue in the fight. He also is planning, as of next month, a number of rallies around the country with thematic issues to be dealt with. So, meaning he's actually in campaign. He's also traveling this coming Friday, tomorrow, to Ethiopia to a meeting. So actually he has an agenda, he has a plan. Obviously the question is whether this will go forward, up to what point. Now, yes, he has a plan, and this this defying element will actually be very essential, actually will define mostly the campaign of this year.
Yeah, and of course, as you say, the question is whether or not he'll be allowed to run. Should he be allowed to run? Luis Felipe de Alencastro.
I guess there's 3 points. First, the political future of Lula himself. Second, of his leadership. It's not the same thing, because even in jail, he will have a very strong leadership. And he could support the candidate of the Workers' Party. And third, the future of the Workers' Party itself, because it's in October there are general elections to the chamber also, and Senate, part of the Senate. So the party will be.
Let's pick up on that. Let's pick up on that second point, because I think it's important. If he does wind up going to jail, he could still sort of transfer, if I understand correctly,
yes,
the nomination on the ballot and have his party stay on the ballot.
Yes, that's why he said today he is still campaigning. He has to campaign until the door of the jail. I mean, because even if he has a virtual presence in the campaign, which will be important because he can indicate another candidate. There are 2 names from the Worker Party, and so he will be able to have some interference in the election.
How strong is the case against him? Because his supporters and some international observers are saying that the case on this particular charge relating to that apartment, which he claims he never stayed in, is weak.
Well, we have to remember that he was sentenced to 9 years by first instance judge, and then the Superior Court now raised the time on imprisonment to 12 years and 1 month, and there are 3 judges, 3 different judges. So I can say that the case shall be strong otherwise, and the decision was unanimous. So one of the judges at least would have some doubts on that, and they could vote differently, but they did not. So all the 3 vote on the same phase, on the same voice, on the same. So I think that the case is pretty much strong.
The case is strong for you. He's going to jail.
Well, that's another question and a different one. One of them is the case is strong, yes, but he can challenge that decision. He had more legal things on his hand to do.
Inti Landau, what to make of him?
I think it's natural for Lula to present himself as a victim of a system, but let's not forget that he was president for 8 years and controlled the systems for many years. So it is kind of. And his party kept on controlling the system for several years after he left power. So depicting himself as an outsider is being persecuted by an oligarchy or by the power or by a system is kind of weak. I mean, he used to control everything.
Hang on, you say it's weak, but we can call up the polling numbers, and the latest polls date back from December, and pollsters this Thursday saying that this latest decision could even give him a boost in the polls, and he was already way ahead of the rest of the field. There you see, it's he's on 36%, and you see there the presumed candidate from the ruling party is not even in second place there. What do you make of the numbers we see from this poll, which dates back to December?
I think popularity of a politician doesn't say much about his potential guilt in a graft lawsuit.
Sure.
The fact that he's popular doesn't change much about the strength of the case against him.
He's not being judging because he controlled everything for 7 years. He's being judged because he's supposed to be the owner of a flat, and there's no proof on it.
Oh no, of course, no. I'm not saying. I'm just saying that he's showing himself as a victim of a system he may be, there may be political interference in the case against him, but he cannot just say that there's nothing against him.
Luis Felipe de Alencastro, you heard there Fernando Santiago say, yeah, all right, the case can seem weak to some, but the sentence was stiffened by the appellate court.
Yes, they did it I mean, that's the opinion of Governor Flavio Dino, who is a very important judge, also is the governor of Maranhão. And he said that the penalty was to raise it because they could, like that, avoid prescription. That was completely prepared before. By the way, all the lawyers that were there noted that the three judges had already wrote before all their interventions, and you see they didn't listen either the lawyer or the prosecutor. They did change. They have already wrote their decision before. That's very odd.
All right, so the argument is on over how impartial the judges were. Let's listen to Brazil's current president. The center writes, Michel Temer, he so far is not running. From the World Economic Forum in Davos, he hailed Tuesday's court decision.
I think corruption is a natural topic of discussion. There's a hard, ongoing fight against corruption in the country. But the main answer to your question is the revelation that in Brazil, institutions are undoubtedly working. We have an absolute separation of powers, each and every one of them exercising their activities freely and independently.
Jamil Chade, institutions are working?
It's a good question. I spent the last 3 days with President Temer in Davos, and obviously there was a very clear strategy from the government side to try to depoliticize the issue, because they know that whatever, or they knew even before the decision was taken, that whatever result was coming, it would have a political impact. So what happened was very interesting. Even before the decision was taken, there was basically an order by Temer to his ministers that were with him also in Davos, basically telling the ministers, please do not comment on the decision. Don't celebrate the decision. Don't regret the decision either. So there was a clear strategy to try, first of all, as this intervention from him proved, to try to show to international investors that there's a basically rule of law in Brazil, that there is, as he said, institutions are working. So this is in one side. On the other side, not getting into the debate meant also that he was trying, at least that's what the government is trying to do, is to avoid Lula to use this as a political tool, to avoid creating a victim. So this is a strategy. By no means I'm saying I agree with not, but this is what we saw for the last 3 days in Davos, with a very, very concerted action between Temer himself, but also the ministers who were, in a way, having talks with investors, with us, obviously the press, but having a role to play in the sense of trying to assure to investors, to businessmen, and obviously to leaders in Davos that rule of law in Brazil is working.
I was going to say, Jamil,
it's
was
obviously
Jamil, I was going to say, was he convincing? Was President Temer convincing to his audience? What do they make of what's going on in Brazil right now in Davos?
Well, for business leaders, what we heard, CEOs of many companies, they were asking basically for a continuation of the current economic policy. But all of them, absolutely, everyone we talked to, were saying, well, actually, the elections are still considered as a risk. We don't know what is still going to happen. I spoke to the president of the forum, of the Economic Forum, and he said, yes, it's a question mark. So, yes, investors are looking back to Brazil. The economy presumably will grow 3% this year. That's what the government promises, at least. But at the same time, they're saying, yes, maybe the recession is over. But how will all this play in the political scene? Honestly, I cannot say what will be 2018 in Brazil, but obviously they're all watching the political setting.
All watching it, and when you listened there to Michel Temer, what was your reaction, Luis Felipe de Alan Castro?
I mean, he's in Davos now, and Brazil was very isolated. Everyone tell that. And the only chief of state he thought, it was the prime minister of Harare from Lebanon, from the country of his father. He have an important meeting at all. I guess the international community, every international leader had avoided to go to Brazil. They go to Argentina, they go to Colombia, Chile, Uruguay. They just turn around, don't go to Brazil, and you and many others. So Brazil is, it's diplomatically, it's on the freeze, for instance.
Yeah, because the scandal that started back in, 2014 now. We're now in 2018, Fernando Santiago, and there's the sense that the whole of the political class in Brazil is tainted.
Yes, and probably it is, because this Operation Car Wash is kind of cleaning up, as its name says, the political practice in Brazil, and they are touching everybody from the right as from the left. And because the left was in power before, and by the way, the law that probably will impeach the fact that Lula can run for president now into this year was promulgated by him in 2010. So he's going to try to contest a law that at the time was made for the guys from the right, so they could not pretend to run for any political courses, maybe. And now he will try a little bit of his own measures that he put back in Brazil. So what I say is that all the political classes from the right or from the left, they are indeed touched by that.
Yeah, and we're going to ask when we come back our panel whether there's light at the end of the tunnel for this investigation and for the various scandals that have unraveled as a result. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.
We are journalists, and normally you have to listen to us, but you have things to tell us too. Maybe you've experienced a dramatic event, or you've got something important to say. You want to make a difference. That is why we created The Observers. Now, the first step is very easy. You get in touch with our team. Send us your images, tell us what you've seen. And then it's our job to get your voice out there, on our site, on social networks, on your mobiles and tablets, and on TV, of course. You can appear in our weekly show via webcam. Or perhaps we'll come see you in person, where you live, in your country, your town, and we'll work together on a report for our investigative show, The Observer.